AnneMarie Mazotti Gouveia is the award-winning author of Drifter's Realm, Mirror Tree, and Brave 4, receiving the Literary Titan Gold Book Award, Story Mustang Seal of Approval, Story Mustang's Purple Dragonfly Book Award First Place, the Dragon Wizard Book Prize, and the 2024 Feathered Quill Book Award Finalist. The fourth book in our series, Hallows Realm, will be released in 2026. AnneMarie was born and raised in California. She has a vivid imagination and loves writing magical adventure stories that takes place in strange lands. She grew up with a library card in her pocket and a stack of books on her deck. She is passionate about reading, art, and family, the youngest of seven children, a mother of four children, and a grandmother. She's traveled through Europe and has lived in Germany, Washington, and Kansas. A former high-tech executive at a multi-billion-dollar company with a Bachelor of Science Information Technology degree, she is a geek at heart who enjoys hiking, yoga, mentoring women through Women Unlimited International, and trips to Disneyland with her husband and family. And Mary lives in Northern California with her husband and two mischievous cats, Rocky and Prasa. She is a member of XBCWI and Matt Dablo CWC. And in today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, excitement, and joy and honor as well to offer the show today, AnneMarie Mazotti Gouveia. Welcome on the show, AnneMarie. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Peter, for having me. I'm very glad to be here.
I'm very excited actually. It's amazing how we are here sitting down across internet connectivity, several miles away, several oceans apart, to talk about your amazing body of literature work. And I'd like to say again, thank you very much for joining in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, Han Mary, we are going to get into the nitty-gritty of what actually inspired you to write Drifter's Realm, which of course is the first book in the Drifter's Realm trilogy series. But then you've been a writer now for the past 4 years, and you've had published multiple titles aside from Drifter's Realm. I wanted to ask you, what is your first creative spark as a writer? What is that first time lightning for you as a writer? What is that thing that fuels you in, that keep you inspired, that keeps you motivated to get on this journey, this literature writing journey, and keep you going quite unstoppably? If you can run us through also how you get into writing, what's the foundation like for you, that'll be great.
Absolutely. So, why I write is because there are stories inside of me that I just want to put out into the world to
Hmm.
make the world a better place, to bring color and life and hope to the world through
Yeah.
my stories, through my writing. And how I first began writing, it started years ago with raising our four children. I used to watch them every day, lugging their backpacks to school and home and to their friends' houses. And I always wondered back when they were in their teenage years, what
Hmm.
would it be like if everything they needed, if everything they had to have in order to live their lives was included in that backpack? And that was the
Wow.
spark that got me started on writing the very first book in the Drifter's Realm series.
Well, I've also that is such an amazing way to get started at writing. That's a lovely story you've told, actually. I love the sound of it. With the backpack and the connection it has in there. Quite beautiful and quite awesome. And I'd also like to ask you, how did you come up choosing the title name, Drifter's Realm? In the Drifter's Realm trilogy, how does that come to be for you? And also, what sort of message, themes, and mission do you hope to achieve with this story? If you can run us through that would be great.
Yes. So Drifter's Realm is the name of the place where they live in the story, where the characters live. And the reason I picked Drifter's Realm is because throughout the story, they end up drifting through the realm. They become somewhat nomads in trying to save their world. So, in the moving around between deserts and huge trees where they live in the trunks and caves underground, they find themselves drifting. And the drifting is part of the theme of the story. It sort of ties back to how we as adults and teenagers and children, we are kind of drifting through life. And then these
Mm,
barriers, we find these barriers that either make our lives more understandable in the way that they kind of close us in and keep us from drifting too far, or they
mm,
push us into an adventure or into a situation where we have to become more than we ever thought we could be. So I really
mm,
liked the title Drifter's Realm because it signifies not just where the story takes place, but it signifies something that's happening throughout the story with these teenagers who are embarking on a journey, an unexpected journey
mm.
together for each other, and in some cases against each other as they
Wow.
move forward through the story.
I love the sound of that, actually. That's a very beautiful one you've mentioned. And if you have a copy of the book there with you, I'd like you to show it to the camera just so we can see what it looks like. That's a beautiful cover. Would you like to tell us about the making of that cover? Because I think there's a story behind it. But I can see some faces in there that looks like of a lion and
Yes,
another one in there. Could you tell us about the making of that?
absolutely. So on the cover, in the center of the cover is one of the main characters. She's the
Oh,
youngest character in the story, but she also happens to be a main character, and her name is Ro. And in the
oh,
story, she is 12 years old and she is a life giver. And then behind her, that lion, that's actually her brother. He's a tamer and he's an older brother, and he's able to change into that lion whenever things get too scary or too rough, or whenever
mm,
something happens. He's able to protect her. They also have a younger brother, and then there's a tiger and a panther on both sides of where she's sitting. They're sort of peeking out of the forest, and those
mm.
animals are their friends. The tiger
Wow.
is a friend of hers, and the black panther is a friend of her brother's. They're not
Mm.
able to speak as characters, but they're intuitive and understand what the children need in the book.
Mm, that's an amazing one, actually, because I know sometimes book covers has a story behind this, behind the making of them, that might be quite different from the story in the actual book, or kind of stylishly intertwined and interconnected. And I know every book cover has a story behind them, has a story to tell, and you can actually illustrate, tell the story of a cover for like 2 or 3 or 5 minutes, still trying to explain, yeah, this is what it looks like, this is what this is about, etc. So, yeah, that's an amazing one. Thank you for sharing. I love that. Absolutely. And after the first book, Drifter's Realm, you continue the trilogy with the second book, which is titled Mirror Tree, and the third book as well, Brave Force. Now, what inspired this installment, and what themes were you hoping to explore as the series unfolds and develop?
In the beginning of the series, the teenagers live on different farms within the story.
Mhm.
And they live there from ages 12 to 18,
Oh,
learning and practicing the magic that they each get in their very individual backpacks. So, for
oh,
example, Ro, as I explained, she's a life giver. Her brother Tamer, or brother Theo, is a tamer. Her older friends are they're knowledge keepers. They all have different skills. There's a couple of chemists in the story. So the
mm,
story begins with them working and living on the farms, and then something goes terribly wrong in their world. They sort of feel this oppression coming from the leader of the farms, the leader of Drifter's Realm, and
wow.
they go in search of their father to understand what is really going on with this oppressive leader, and that sort of kicks the story off. The reason there's
Mm,
three books is because I planned it that way. I initially planned that the story would be a trilogy, because when you
mm,
introduce a world like Drifter's Realm and you take multiple characters through that world, you need enough time to be able to cover the full breadth and length and depth of the story,
absolutely. Yeah.
and it couldn't have been covered in one book.
Yeah.
And i
Yeah.
i didn't want the story to be targeted necessarily to adults. although a lot of adults have
Mm,
read all three books. I wanted it targeted to middle grade and young adults,
mm,
and the length of which the books that those ages can sit through and readily read is about how long
mm.
each one of those books is. So it was
Wow.
very deliberate to make
Wow.
the books be a certain length. And then I just want to mention one other thing. I also added within the stories, there's an illustration at the start of every chapter to help
Wow.
you see this world where they live in
Oh.
all three books.
Wow, that's amazing to know, actually. I love your description, your take on all of this. Quite interesting and quite fascinating. Thank you for sharing with us. And fantasy often blends real world themes with imagination. Were there personal experiences or lessons that inspired certain part of the story for you? And also, in what way do you think your own background and environment have influenced the stories you write? If in any way, I'm just curious.
Absolutely. So the themes in the story are about family, trust,
Mm,
hope, perseverance, teamwork. It's not it's not a true fantasy story in that there's flying
mm,
unicorns and flying dragons. It's not
yeah.
like that. The
Mm,
story has magic in it for the
wow.
purposes of creating an adventure, but the story is not about the magic. The story is truly about the teenagers, the brothers, the
Mm,
sisters, the friends, the way they get along, the way they work against each other and for each other,
wow.
not sure if they can trust each other as they go on this adventure through Drifter's Realm, trying to save their world together, knowing and understanding who is on their side and who isn't. And I think that for the most part, um, the story would leave you feeling like you want to know more. There's a prophecy in the story that sort of is a riddle that the teenagers have to figure out. That it's sort of like a
Mm,
guidepost that leads them through the story as they solve each line of this prophecy to
mm,
then help them come to the conclusion that they're coming to at the end, which is hopefully to save their world, to save Drifter's Realm from destruction.
wow, I love this. This is such an amazing description you've got in here. That's such an amazing, quite captivating and very interesting, compelling as well. Very amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I wanted to ask you this because one of the most interesting thing to me as a writer is to sit back and listen to readers' feedback. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be quite complex in its totality is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinions. And sometimes the reader might get the actual message the author intended in the writing. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. Sometimes they might be far from getting it, say several miles or several kilometers away. And most of the times, quite ridiculously, they might interpret the book upside down, and misinterpret the entire message. And as interestingly fun as they sound, I'd like to ask you, I'm not sure if you've ever experienced this, but then how do you feel when readers interpret your work differently than you intended? How does that make you feel as a storyteller?
It actually makes me excited because I like when people see dimensions of the characters that I never intended. Each
Mm,
character you build with a certain dimension, a certain thought, a certain idea of what they value, what matters to them, what makes them tick, why are they doing what they're doing, what motivates
yes.
them. And a lot of
Mm,
these characters come from my life story, growing up in a
mm,
family with six older brothers and sisters back in the 1960s in rural California. We lived like out in the county and playing outdoors, getting to know our neighbors. We didn't sit in front of TVs. We played hide and go
mm,
seek. We played stickball in
wow.
the street. We did all those things. So when I created these characters, I had obviously ideas in my mind, but when other people see different facets of their personalities that I never saw, I'm truly
Yeah.
jazzed about that. And in some
Wow.
cases, I may take that input, and in the next
Mm.
book, I may explore that further.
Wow, that's an amazing contribution. I love your answer to that. It's quite interesting. Even myself, I find it quite fascinating that you can find something that's quite different. And I didn't really see that coming. And a reader could point out it's always very beautiful and in some ways satisfying, if you ask me.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
satisfying.
I think it's actually flattering for
Yeah,
somebody
it
to see
is.
something else in a character because it means that they somehow connected with that character, which is
Yeah,
what you want as an author. You want your
yeah,
readers to connect to your characters, which is
absolutely.
why in my books there are multiple characters. If you look at the beginning of the book, at any of my books, you'll see the list of characters, and there's 10 or 12 different characters in each story,
Mm,
and most of them are teenagers. But that's intentional. I want anyone who picks up this book anywhere in the world to find themselves in any one of those characters and maybe in multiple characters. So
mm,
honestly, it's a form of flattery if somebody takes enough time to point out to me something about the story or something about a character. It tells me that they've really thought about it. And these stories,
mm,
although they're fun to read, and there's excitement and there's twists and there's turns and there's just a whole lot of unexpectedness within the storyline itself, it's
mm.
really about the kids, who they are, what they believe, what
Yeah,
they're trying to accomplish, and can they actually do it together?
absolutely. That's a beautiful one, really. I love your take on that. Very beautiful and quite very true. Quite amazingly. And that's one of the things I found book club conversations to be so interesting. The fact that we have a 10 gathering of people or 15 people who has read a similar book and come together to talk about it. And the first person review differ from the second person review differ slightly again from the third person review differ again from the fourth person review, and everybody keep shipping in their own opinion, perception of what they think of this character, of what they think of the storyline, of what they think of this transition, etc. And sometimes you got to wondering, sorry, did you read the same book? Are you sure I mean, reviewing the same book that I read? It's quite interesting, very beautiful. Part of beauty of literature conversation, actually.
I do believe that when we read stories, we bring ourselves to that
Yeah,
story and we're looking
absolutely.
for ourselves in that
In
story.
there.
We're understanding ourselves better through those characters, which is why I
Yeah,
love reading and writing and why I wanted to write
absolutely.
for middle grade is because
Mm,
those kids still believe that anything is possible. They still
mm,
believe that magic is potentially an actuality,
mm,
that
mm,
things can still turn out well in life. They are not tarnished, they are not watching the news, they are not living in the full world. They're living in the
mm.
world of their imagination, which is why it's fun to write these stories and bring
Yeah,
bring these very thoughtful, very personable, very strong, and very different cast of characters together so that they
absolutely.
can see themselves and they can see their friends and their brothers and their sisters in these
Mm,
characters and feel connected to the stories.
absolutely. Absolutely. I love your take on this. Is so interesting and so fascinating. Quite educative as well. Thank you. Thank you. And I wanted to ask you, when you began writing the first book, did you already have the full series mapped out, or did the story unfold as you went along writing it? And also, many readers say your world building feels very vivid. Do you start with maps, sketches, or just let the world evolve in your writing and, the whole character take control of where the whole story is going to?
Yeah, so when I wrote the first book, I knew there would be three books. I knew I couldn't
Wow.
cover the whole journey
In one
in one
book.
book or two
Yeah.
books.
Mm,
But I'll tell you this, I knew how the story was going to begin and I knew how it was going to end. And I had a list of about 12 different things I wanted to have happen in the story.
mm,
The prophecy, plot twists, unexpected character reveals, all those sort of
mm,
little red herrings that you want to have in a story, even for young people, so that they're drawn
mm,
into the adventure and they feel like they're part of what's happening. So
Mm.
it took a lot of careful mapping that I did,
Wow.
some in the beginning, some in the middle, and sort of some at the end, basically.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's it was a journey because I'd never written a book before. I mean,
Wow.
I'm a
Oh.
former information technology executive at a high tech company. I worked there for 30 years. I've never written
Wow.
a middle grade book, but I grew up in a family with 7 kids and I raised 4 kids myself. So it was a challenge, but I knew from the
Mm.
beginning that it would definitely be 3 books. I actually drew the Drifters Realm map myself, and then I had an
Wow.
artist create that map. So before I began the first book, I completed multiple renditions of the map and
Mm.
then finalized the map by the time I was done with maybe the second chapter of the first book. And the map
Wow.
pretty much stayed the same through all 3 books, except in the third book, there were some new added trails. But I built that
Wow.
world from a world I already know. The
Oh.
world That world is filled with waterfalls like
Mm.
Yosemite, caves like the Pinnacles National Monument,
Mm.
stone buildings like you would see in New Mexico, adobe type buildings.
Mm.
Um, there's a lake like Lake Tahoe. I mean, there's all sorts of elements within that book, places I've been, underground caves, you name it. It didn't just
Mm.
come from thin air. It came from my experience growing up in a family where we went camping. Those were our vacations and our holidays and our trips. And those ideas became that map that
Wow.
began the story, that began the journey that spanned those 3 books.
This is really amazing. That is really compelling to say. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And just in case, do you have any other work you're currently working on in progress of the series? Or, you have the first, second, third. Do you have any other one coming? Or that's all for now?
Actually, other than the fourth book, Hallows Realm, which takes the characters to a completely different realm,
Yeah.
um, that's I'm going to write 3 books about Hallows Realm, and then
Mhm.
another realm is introduced in the final book, Brave Falls, the
Oh,
Timeless Realm. So I'm actually going to write 3 books about Hallows Realm, 3 books about Timeless Realm, and then I might write 3 books that span all 3 realms. But
mm,
for now, I'm not focusing on writing any other genre, only
mm,
because I want, as an author, to bring to the world stories that are nonviolent. I mean, these stories,
yeah.
things happen, but nobody really dies in any of these books.
Wow.
There's magic, but the story's not about the magic. And there's no technology in any of these stories. These kids don't have phones, they don't have cars, they don't even have bicycles. They're living in tree
Wow.
trunks and caves and whatnot. But I think I want to bring back to a young generation the idea that adventures can happen in your backyard, at your
Mm,
park, maybe inside your house. They
wow.
don't have to happen, necessarily at a movie theater or in front of your laptop. They happen with engaging with the people and friends and family that you have, and then
Mm.
exploring and being curious about your world.
Wow, this is really impressive and quite fascinating. That's very amazing of you to say. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning. And as a published author that you are, what sort of advice would you give other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book, especially in your kind of genre? And also, just in case we have some viewers who are watching this interview and would love to get a copy of Drifter's Realm series, any book in the series particularly, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
So, what I would say to an author that has not been published and that is struggling or working on writing, I would just say write.
Mm,
Write what moves you, write what you feel passionate about, write that thing that you have to get out of your head and onto paper. Otherwise, you just
mm,
can't sleep at night. I think the more passionate you feel about what you write, the
mm,
more beautifully written what you write will
yeah,
be.
yeah.
Because writing is you exposing yourself to the world, which is a
Mm,
scary thing. So, and that takes me on to publishing. publishing is scary because the thought and idea of taking part of yourself, putting it on paper,
Yeah,
and sharing it with the
yeah,
world is quite intimidating, even if it's
absolutely.
fantasy adventure. I
Yeah.
mean, it truly is exposing the inner part of you and the inner part of your life to others.
Mm,
But I would say just keep doing it. Even if you
yeah.
just write 500 words a week or 1,000 words a month, it's never done in one sitting unless
Yeah.
it's a poem or a short story. If you're
Mm,
writing a novel, it's a months long adventure, and if not a years long adventure, but
wow.
it's an adventure worth taking.
Wow. That's an amazing one, really. That's a good advice you've got in there. And I'm hoping that viewers, even including myself, would love to utilize it. Now, I'd like you to tell us about the purchase platform for the books.
Oh yes. Okay, so I because I want kids everywhere to be able to read my books,
Mm.
they are offered free if you have Kindle Unlimited. They are offered free on Amazon through
Oh,
Kindle Unlimited. You can go download them to your library and read
wow.
all three books. And I wanted it to be that way because I want kids everywhere who have the advantage of having Kindle Unlimited to be able to read the stories. Otherwise, they can be purchased through Amazon. You can order them also online through Barnes and Noble, and any
Mm.
independent
So,
bookstore should be able to order the book for you, and then deliver it to you. Also, the first chapter of each of those three books you can read for free on my website.
oh, wow. Wow, you've produced a lot of, free, what's it called, template in there, which I find to be quite amazing and quite great, really. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Aunt Mary book directly on Amazon, Barnes& and Nobles, on our website, and also another platform. I also left link to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for joining me in conversation around Drifter's Realm, around Mirror Tree, and Brave Force. This, I must say, it's so beautiful, quite amazing, quite compelling the story you've told and written. And I want to say thank you once again for joining in.
Thank you, Peter, so much for having me. I really appreciate being here and the opportunity to talk about my books with you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well.